know the saying, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, but nobody ever really explains why it's true. What's actually happening inside you when the people around you shape who you become? What's the mechanism? How do you use it deliberately rather than just hoping you've landed in the right rooms?
This is the Born to be Brilliant podcast, helping you harness the habits and unlock the tools to bring you more meaning, vibrance, and the personal power to help you shine like the diamond you are.
Welcome back. Today's episode is one I've genuinely been looking forward to recording because we're going somewhere that I think is going to shift how you see something you've probably heard 100 times. You know the saying, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You've seen it on motivational posters, heard it in podcasts, read it in books, seen it in memes and quotes and everything. Every time, it's offered as though the statement itself is the insight, as though simply knowing it is enough to do something useful with it. But nobody ever really explains why it's true. What's actually happening inside you when the people around you shape who you become? What's the mechanism? And once you understand the mechanism, how do you use it deliberately rather than just hoping you've landed in the right rooms? That's what we're getting into today, and I promise it's more fascinating than the quote ever suggested. It literally has been something I've been thinking about. I'm like, how though? How? Why? How does it work? Because that's how my brain always works. So I've gone and done my research. So I'm going to share that with you. So let's start by acknowledging that the quote, while it is useful as a prompt, a nudge, and a reminder, it's also a bit of a conversation stopper. It tells you what to do. Surround yourself with people who you aspire to be like, without actually giving you any real understanding of why that works or what's actually happening when it does. And without that understanding, most of us apply it in a fairly surface level way. So we'll think about who we follow on social media, or whether we should leave a networking group. Friendship is actually serving us or draining us. All of these things might be worth considering, but they're missing the deeper and far more interesting layer. Because what's actually happening when the people around you influence who you become is a neurological, behavioural, and emotional process that's been running the background of your life since before you could even speak. And understanding it changes everything about how you approach the environments you put yourself in. Are you ready for the science? Okay. In the early 1990s, a team of researchers at the University of Parma in Italy made a discovery that one psychologist later described as being on the same plane as DNA in the realm of scientific importance. So they were studying the motor cortex of I've got to say this right, of macaque monkeys. I think that's how you say it, macaque monkeys. When they noticed something unexpected, certain neurons in the monkeys' brains were firing, not only when the monkeys performed specific actions, but also when they simply watched another individual performing the same actions. So these became known as mirror neurons. And what makes them so remarkable is what they tell us about the relationship between observing and doing. For these neurons, there's functionally very little difference between watching something happen and doing it yourself. The same neural pathways activate in both cases. In humans, the mirror neuron system is understood to be the neurological foundation for empathy, imitation, and social learning. When you watch someone's face express an emotion, and I'm really expressive, so goodness knows, right? Your brain activates as though you're feeling that emotion. That makes sense, because I definitely feel the feels. When you observe someone's posture, their energy, the way they move through a room, your nervous system is actually running a simulation of it. You're not just watching, you're absorbing. Making sense? This is like, oh yeah, of course. So now think about what this means for the people you spend the most time with. Every time you're in their presence, your brain is doing this constantly. is absorbing their emotional states, their energy, their behavioural patterns, their standards, their way of engaging with the world. And your brain's doing this not because you're weak or easily led. This was something I was so curious about. Are there dominant and less dominant energies? It's not because you're weak or easily led, but because your nervous system is doing exactly what it evolved to do, which is to read, mirror, and synchronize with the social environment around you. So let's look at the emotional part of this. You've probably noticed this in practice, even if you didn't have the language for it. I certainly did, and I didn't have the language for it either. Think about what happens when you're building rapport with someone. You start to mirror their body language, often without realizing you're doing it. If they lean in, you lean in. If they slow their speech, yours slows too. If they're animated and expressive, you find yourself becoming more like that as well. It's something we do instinctively because it creates connection and signals safety. That's your mirror neuron system at work. And what makes it relevant here is that you're not doing it consciously. It's happening below the level of your awareness, which means it's also happening all the time with everyone you spend significant amounts of time with, whether you're consciously trying to build rapport or not. Psychologists, Elaine Hatfield, I noted these down, John Caciopol and Richard Rapson, I've written those down, so I hope I've pronounced those right. They formally documented this in the early 1990s as emotional contagion. So feel free to go and look them up because it's so interesting. What they defined as the tendency to automatically mimic and synchronize expressions, vocations, postures, and movements with those of another person, and consequently to feel reflections of their emotional states. Importantly, their research found that people's own emotions were influenced more by others' nonverbal cues than by anything those people said. It's not what someone tells you they're feeling that transfers. It's how they carry themselves. It's the energy in that room. That is just so fascinating to me. And I hope you're getting that too. Like, I've had to pull some important science in there. So I hope that you've followed because I had to take this in a few times. So this is why you go into spaces and rooms and you come out feeling pumped and lifted or drained and overwhelmed because of the energy in the room. And I love this about events because someone who organizes a great event knows how to make sure that energy is really, really strong. So this extends well beyond emotions. Cornell economist Robert Frank's research on behavioural contagion shows that our friends and peers' choices profoundly shape our own. Not surprising. This influences everything from our spending habits and risk tolerance. Think about that even in your own close proximity. Like, how are you compared to those around you? And our ambitions and the standards that we hold ourselves to. Standards, it turns out, are extraordinarily contagious. I love that. The level at which the people around you operate becomes, over time, the level that feels normal to you, which means it also becomes the level you unconsciously calibrate to. Put simply, the environment you're in is it's constantly, quietly, and unknowingly recalibrating you. The question is whether you're aware of it and whether you are choosing the direction of the recalibration deliberately. Are you leading it or absorbing it? So that's my next question I wanted to find out. Who leads? Who follows? How does that work? Because can't all be leaders, can't all be followers. This is interesting. Okay. Something the motivational version of this quote never touches on. And I find it one of the more interesting aspects of all of this. Not everyone experiences social environments in the same way. Research into personality and social influence shows that susceptibility to influence isn't a fixed trait. Some people are more naturally permeable to the emotional and behavioural states of those around them. Others are more naturally boundaried, more likely to hold their own internal reference point, regardless of the room they're in. And there's a hierarchy layer to this that I think will resonate with a lot of you. Studies show that the same person can sit in a dominant, influential position in one group and a relatively differential follower position in another. Not because they've changed, but because of how they read the perceived social order of the room and where they feel that they sit within it. And I'm sure you can think of this for yourself and rooms you've been in. I know this from my own experiences clearly as I know anything. I've been in rooms where I have felt entirely at home, confident, fully myself, and naturally leading the energy without any particular effort, just flows. And I've been in rooms where I become a shadow of that person, feeling almost outside of my own body, watching myself from behind, like a smaller version of myself that just doesn't feel like me, doesn't feel like my version of me. You know, like when you feel a bit like why am I not feeling like me today? Or why is it in this space I feel very confident and in my zone, and in this space I feel like quite meek and like I'm holding back or something? The first kind of room or environment, that kind of thing, is alignment. And the second is misalignment, basically. And the interesting thing is that it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the caliber of the person in the room either. It has to do with perceived hierarchy, with who I sense holds authority in that space, and with whether the environment itself feels like somewhere my natural way of being is valued and reflected back. So that's a really important distinction. It's not them, it's us. So I've come to understand that I make a far better leader than I do a follower. And that's not arrogance, it's just self-awareness. It's taken me until my mid-40s to really see that. And it's been that way my whole life, like even as a young child. I've also come to understand that we genuinely need both. We need people who naturally hold the energy of a room and people who naturally absorb and refine it. Because group action, because of that full range, not despite it. Imagine a room that's completely and utterly full of leader types. Oh, can you imagine? And then imagine a room that's just full of followers. There'd just be no kind of lead. The important thing is knowing which you tend to be and in which context, and choosing your rooms accordingly. There are things where I go, I can't go to that because I just will feel frustrated watching. Some people feel like that about shows. If you're a performer, you might struggle to watch a show because you just want to be on the stage. Do you know what I mean? In other circumstances, it might be required to be quite a figurehead, and you're much happier following and being in the audience. So you don't want to be in that environment. It's how we're wired. So all of this works in both directions as well. The same mechanisms that can raise your standards, expand your risk tolerance, elevate your ambition, and recalibrate your sense of what's possible can also do the opposite. Research in behavioural contagion shows that pessimism, fear, self-limiting beliefs, low standards, and even depression can spread through social networks in the same way that energy and ambition can. It's not dramatic, it tends to be gradual, which is partly what makes it worth paying close attention to. The good news, and this is important, is that awareness of the mechanism is itself protective. Once you're aware of it, when you understand that your emotional and behavioural states are being influenced by the people around you, you move from being an unconscious recipient, absorber of that influence, to someone who can be intentional about it. You start to notice which environments expand you and which ones contract you. You make more deliberate choices about where you put yourself, who you spend significant amounts of time with, and what kinds of rooms you seek out. And you also start to recognize your own influence on others, because this isn't a one-way process. You're also affecting every environment you step into, particularly if you're someone who naturally leads rather than follows. The energy you bring, the standards you hold, the way you show up consistently, that's shaping the people around you too, whether you're thinking about it or not. This brings me to something I want to share with you. because it connects directly to everything we've been talking about. One of the most powerful things I'm building inside eSchool is an intentional environment. Not a course, not a library of content to consume alone, but a space where you're genuinely surrounded by people who are operating at a high level, thinking seriously about their businesses and themselves, and showing up consistently in a community that holds real standards. The weekly power up sessions, the real life meetups across the UK, and maybe someday overseas. The conversations happening inside that space, all of it is designed around the understanding that environment shapes outcomes in ways that information alone never can, never will. And founding members are getting access before anyone else, with the opportunity to help shape what exactly that becomes, that environment. If this episode has resonated, the details are in the show notes to come and be a part of it from the beginning. Okay, so the intentional environment. You become who you spend time with. The science behind why that's true is genuinely crazy. It's like so fascinating. From the mirror neurons firing in your brain as you watch the people around you, visuals, to the emotional states spreading between people below the level of conscious awareness. This is why kids and pets pick up on our energy, right? To the standards that rise and fall based on who your proximity to is most often, who you're in close proximity to. Understanding the mechanism changes the relationship you have with that mechanism. So you're no longer just hoping you happen to be in the right rooms or guessing what they are. You're making deliberate decisions about the environments you put yourself in, the people whose energy you want your nervous system regularly synchronizing with, and the standards you want proximity to consistently. So in-person environments matter enormously for this. The rooms you physically walk into, the events you attend, the people you choose to be around consistently. But online environments matter too, perhaps more than people realize, because emotional contagion research has shown that the mechanism works across digital spaces as well as physical ones. Who you follow, what you consume when you scroll, the communities that you're active in or passive in and just watch and absorb, all of it is part of your environment in the relevant sense. A lot like an algorithm, really, when you think about it. So get intentional about all of it. Choose your rooms deliberately, your content deliberately. Seek out people who are operating at the level you are reaching for. Not to copy them, not to mimic them, but because your nervous system will start to run at that frequency. And notice which rooms make you more yourself and which ones make you less. Feel free to step away from what doesn't serve you. It's like following someone on social media that annoys you. Why? Just stop following. Stop consuming that. I think that's one of the most valuable things you can do for your business and the person who's running it. So thank you so much for being here today and bearing with me as I got the scientific research part out. The show notes have got everything you need about eSchool and how to get involved from the start. And I will see you all next week when we are going to be exploring something that I think is going to be equally interesting. The conversation around AI in the context of what it's actually replacing, where the human becomes more valuable and why integration rather than opposition is the only sensible position right now. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that. Until then, you were born to be brilliant. Don't let anyone, anything convince you otherwise.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and remember, go out there and shine your light bright because you were born to be brilliant.